Hey y'all, welcome to Religiously Incorrect. I'm Pastor Todd, and you know my partner, Pastor Jeff. And we have a very special guest with us. I mean, extra super duper special guest.
We are excited tonight.
We paid a lot of money for him to get here,
my
too.
God, y'all have no idea.
We're gonna have to take up an extra offering, saints, so don't go nowhere.
We sent the limo and everything.
We're gonna lock the doors. We're gonna get Our very special guest is our friend, our brother, our compatriot in the kingdom, Dr. Dela Cruz, who is a professional counselor, as well as the pastor for how many months now?
For 3 months.
For 3 months of the Warren United Methodist Church in Pittsburgh.
Yes, sir.
So it's not the Warren United Methodist Church in Warren. So do not drive around and look for that church because it does not exist. You will have to drive to Pittsburgh. It's so good to have you.
It's good
Thank
to be
you so much for being with us on today.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the show. You're doing a
We
great
got
job.
one.
We got
one.
We got a fan. We got a following,
You're
y'all.
the first fan, Doc. We appreciate it. We appreciate it. So, Jeff, what is our opening topic? It's so fresh.
Before we even open up,
Go ahead.
can we give a big shout out to this beautiful? Look at this. Look.
Barbershop.
The Black Man's Country Club.
Yeah.
We in the
Yes.
barber shop, y'all.
One
This
of my
is
favorite places.
Free's 5-star barbershop here in Warren, Ohio.
Yes.
He started this in 2015, and now we're on Youngstown Road. What's the address? It's a free plug. What's the address? 4021 Youngstown Road.
Now let me give y'all a heads up. Look what he can do.
Right. That's called the free special.
That's the free special
That's
right
the free
here.
special.
You don't want none of this. You don't want no problems. Well, no problems with me.
Exactly. So shout out to Free. This is Barbershop Talk edition of episode 5 of Religiously Incorrect.
Yes,
and so now, Pastor Jeff, if you give us, what's our little starter topic before we get into it?
Our starter topic is Kirk Franklin
Kirk.
boycotting.
Nephew Kirk.
Nephew Kirk.
Nephew, Lil man.
Stomp Kirk.
Stomp. GP, are you with me?
Do you want a revelation for
Are
Kirk?
you with me?
Are you with me?
Melodies from heaven, Kirk.
And what did he do or say?
Kirk Franklin, if you've watched the video, if you haven't, I strongly suggest that you go to YouTube.
Today.
It just came out today where he is boycotting TBN as well as
Dove Awards
the
and
Dove
the gospel,
Awards,
Christian
which is
something.
basically the same thing
Right.
as the Grammys and this, So what happened was he actually was protesting 3 years ago. It's correct. 3 years ago, he was protesting the violence against blacks as far as Philando Castile, and he made his boycott known on live TV after he got done accepting his award. And after he got done accepting his award, he made these boycotts known and, just asked to pray for the families as well as the police officers' family, and they cut it out. Obviously, he went to them. He said, he talked about his frustration and how he was upset about it. They told him this would not happen again.
It wouldn't happen.
3 years later.
3 years later.
Same thing happens.
Wow.
Same thing happens. He gets another award. He does the same thing. He
Tatiana Jefferson this time. The one in who is it?
Texas.
Fort Worth, who got shot in her own home.
Home. And he said he wanted to pray for her. He wanted to pray for the nephew who actually witnessed the shooting.
Absolutely. 8 years
and once
old.
again, 8 years old. Once again, he wanted to pray for the family of the police officer who done the shooting. Again, they cut it out. And he after wise counsel from his pastor, from his friends, he decided that he was no longer going to support or accept awards from the Dove Awards. And he did say he's not asking everybody to protest with him.
Right.
But we want you to know that we stand with Kirk
We
Franklin.
stand with Kirk.
Absolutely.
We stand with Lil Kirk. We might stand a little taller. We might be a little taller.
Yeah, he is a short brother.
I might not be taller.
Nah,
I'm
you
about the
taller.
same size.
He's taller than Kirk.
He's not just pint size. He's Prince size.
Listen,
We
I
gonna
want to
stand
play
with him. That's for sure.
I want to play Kirk Franklin in a movie, a Lifetime story. I can dance just like
You
Kirk.
can.
I can dance like Kirk.
So we always rap a little bit. given, and I just want to clarify, he didn't like get up to like say anything rough protesting boycott the first time around.
Right.
He was literally just making a statement of concern and feeling like it was his duty as a Christian to be in a room with his evangelical brothers, mostly Caucasian, and to be on a platform to bring attention that, you know, the body of Christ has not been as vocal and at the forefront of those issues as they should be. And then he really said that the second time, where he said we should not be bringing up the rear. We shouldn't be the last ones.
That's right.
And I felt like the way he presented it when he was actually saying it in the awards show was as compassionate and non-threatening and gracious, all the things that I'm normally not when I'm talking about social justice issues. I am not compassionate. And he was like all of those things that I know what it feels like to be sort of scolded because I'm not. And what does it tell you, like, no matter how good you try to say it, if they don't want to hear it, what does that tell you about the black man's perspective on what's happening, even in the church?
What is profound to me is that he, and you made mention, one of you brothers made mention of this earlier, that he's the only one to do it.
Right.
Where are the rest of the black gospel performers that should be standing along with Kirk Franklin, and even with their power and influence, saying we need to stand against our evangelical brothers and sisters.
Right.
Not just the way the current politic is, but you as a Christian, the gospel continues to speak to the support of the poor or the least of these.
Absolutely.
And why is our community the community that's not getting justice under the law?
Right.
If I'm not mistaken, the 14th Amendment, I think, or the 4th Amendment. So why aren't we to equal justice under the law?
Equal protection.
And so why aren't we safe when a police officer rolls up on us? And we're Christian. And so why aren't we together speaking about that particular issue? And that's what's really the quietness of the white evangelical community. And furthermore, TBN has been in that park of conservative, straight white evangelical for a very long time.
And you have to dance to their beat if you want to play the game. You said something profound to me, and I'll answer my own question, but it's one thing to stand against what we perceive as evil, you know, what is out there. But you said when we have to stand against our evangelical brothers. And it almost feels like that's something that we shouldn't say. It sounds so uncouth, so callous, but it's almost like, what else is there to do when someone proves to you over and over again that they don't have your concerns at heart? They diminish your concerns, even critique your concerns.
Well, remember Dr. King in the letter in the Birmingham jail. His biggest disappointment, as he wrote on the sides of a newspaper.
In a prison.
Absolutely.
And again, you know, one of the most prolific writers, if you've ever read anything beyond just the I Have a Dream speech, he writes his disappointment and shares, where have you been?
Right.
Why are you so silent? And we're experiencing that again, and it doesn't make any sense.
Well, I would say, even if we want to go further, even than Dr. Martin Luther King, let's look at what Jesus said. Who is my brother?
Right.
Who is my mother? Those that do the will of God. And that's what if they're not doing the will of God, if they're not standing up for justice for all, you know, we talk about Black Lives Matter, White Lives Matter, but we need to stand up for justice for all. And if Black lives are part of the all, which they are, which they are, they got to stand. And I would just also say this: to me, it's amazing that somebody of his caliber, you know, if I speak out from the church that I'm at, you know, I might get a couple haters, couple people on Facebook saying something. He might lose some money.
And you know, he did have a forerunner, because Lecrae, the gospel rapper, really put himself out there with a few things on Twitter. And he was really in the evangelical CCM world. And he's taken some hits. So I think we just have to be realistic about the world we live in. Prejudice, you know, as we say that, you know, death don't know no age. Prejudice doesn't know a religion. Prejudice doesn't know a faith center.
And in some faiths and in some of the more conservative evangelical circles, racism is taught. as a part of a theological belief system.
Correct.
That there were theologies that started in the 60s that and one well-known preacher of a movement who said that blacks and whites should not get married.
That's right.
I mean, and if you look at every major denomination, I'm a Methodist. I'm actually an ordained Presbyterian minister working as a revitalizer in Pittsburgh. You've had racism in each of the major denominations.
Correct.
But you've also had racism in all of the evangelical churches, even Pentecostal churches also.
Correct.
And so it seems like we just keep ignoring this reality that keeps pushing us back 10 or 20 years, and we can't ignore it anymore.
Well, I stand with Kirk. We all together collectively stand with Kirk, and we hope
he get on my shoulders. He's still a short brother. You know what I mean?
Pastors,
but I put him on my shoulders.
gospel artists, choir leaders, personalities need to be quick. And it just went out today, but they need to be quick about the support. So we don't want to belabor the point, and maybe we'll follow up later and see like the aftermath. But today's subject matter is something very near and dear to not just our hearts, but also it is sort of permeating the culture. It's in the zeitgeist right now. It's like out there, and that is mental health. And we brought Dr. Dela Cruz here just because this is one of his specialties. And partly because he's a little crazy.
All right, that's right.
So he's an expert, and he helps people to deal with their crazy. And just as and this is religiously incorrect. So we don't have the perfect language. We don't have the perfect lingo. We're here to talk as human beings who happen to be pastors. But we first want to talk about the growth, and in the good way, an acceptance of the need for mental health care, self-care, you know, what we started talking, you know, that's become the term self-care, caring for oneself emotionally, looking after oneself mentally, and not just attributing everything to spirituality, not just calling our young people bad or misbehave, not just looking at a woman as unstable or, you know, you're just a wild chick or whatever. So what have you seen in the last 10 years or so or 5 years or so that has encouraged you, particularly in the Black community, about mental health?
Well, what I could start off by saying is some of our more celebrity individuals are talking more about mental health issues. I'm trying to remember her name. She's on Blackish, and she's the mother of
Tracy Ellis Ross.
She has a book out now, and she shares about her individual battle with mental illness and some of the things and how maybe that mental illness has started. So we're getting more celebrities who are talking about it, and athletes. There are a couple of athletes. One who has just retired. He played for the Chicago Bears. He's on Showtime. I can't remember his name, but athletes are talking about it now, and it appears that the more freer we become, the more freer we give ourselves liberating moments. To say, wait a minute, something's wrong. I've been feeling a certain way for a very long time, and it's interfering with my relationships, because usually that's how you determine. Why aren't my relationships growing? Why do people seem to stay away from me? Why is it that I'm not happy when everybody else is happy? And so now the intent to be mentally healthy has stretched a little bit for us, the desire to want to be. And I think that that's due to our growth as a people.
And you said not just the desire to want to be, but the need to be.
The need,
now, take us back, Jeff. What did we used to call, poor mental health? What did we sort of misdiagnose that at when we were coming up? When you see somebody who's not behaving or seems to be off, what did we sort of attribute that to in the past?
Me personally, it was almost retardation. Slow, yes. You know, we made jokes about the yellow school bus, you know, and it was so bad back then where, you know, they literally had classes in in the basement. So you know if they was going in the basement.
Sure.
Oh yeah, you know where you
Yeah.
or up on some high floor or segmented place.
Yeah, some of them were even outside the school in a trailer. So and we looked at those people as if they were different.
Right.
Instead of they were equal, they just had a learning disability or or a mental illness, as we would say.
And even when you get into adults, you just have angry black woman.
Right.
If even if you're not a churchified person, because that sort of Judeo-Christian black church thing kind of permeates the culture, it's a demon.
Right. We called it
a
spirit.
It's a spirit. You need that prayed out of you. Right. And I watched tragically that happen one time. Young lady coming up, and it's like she doesn't need another prayer. She needs help.
That's right.
And truth be told, the more we impose, especially if you come out of certain faith traditions that are a little more aggressive than others spiritually, the more you impose that atmosphere on them, I hate to say you're almost inviting something that wasn't there to be there. And then you're it's like giving unnecessary medicine. Like if you keep giving me medicine, if I'm not sick, I'm going to keep thinking I am sick in ways that I'm not. And I mean, how many times, because we know as quiet as it's kept, a lot of our church experiences that we call deliverance are quite the traumatic experiences. I mean, how many times are you going to push me on the floor and dump oil on me and scream in my ear?
Scream.
Which,
and there's enough voices in my head. I don't need anybody else hollering at me.
By the way, a couple of studies that were done that people who did not have as severe any mental or emotional issues were able to not exercise a spirit, but emote, express more stress. And they were actually felt better after screaming or after yelling. But let's add a little bit of context to this. Historically, you know that we've always been prevented from the very best of any kind of care.
That's correct.
Both medical, mental, and emotional. So we always turned within ourselves to get whatever knowledge we needed. Right? So it was either the mother who would talk to you and listen to you and had a discernment that she could give you the wisdom. And this is also when we valued old wisdom.
Older wisdom.
As
That's correct.
Dr. Thomas of Christian Seminary talks about, we valued it a lot more. So we had no choices in the matter to seek health care or psychological care in other places. Well, now that is changing, we're still fighting with the lack of trust for the medical community,
That's true.
For the psychological community, and with all of the advances we've made, we still have not taken the full advantage of the insurance we have.
Right. Some people don't even know. They don't even know that mental care is a part of health care. Most people don't even explore it.
Yeah, they talk about to us at our job. Let me ask you a question. When we're talking particularly about the African American community, it has always been a unwritten rule that what goes on in this house stays in this house.
Don't tell your business to nobody.
Don't tell your business.
Don't tell your business.
And so I guess my question is there a difference in ratio as far as the Caucasian community coming forward and the black community? I don't know if you know or not, but in your studies, do you see that?
And I've pastored both white and black churches. I've pastored Latino people,
I like how you said that. You see how he said that? Say that again.
Latino. That's that Puerto Rican,
I'm
man.
talking about.
I'm a black Puerto Rican.
That's
Can't
it.
open, right? And our European brothers and sisters in a heartbeat came to me for counseling, long term. Thank God I was qualified to be able to give long-term counseling from anything from schizophrenia to drug and alcohol addiction to severe or moderate depression. But they were quick about trusting, hey, let's go to a professional that does it. Where we have to be cajoled and pressed and pushed. And that part of that's the fear of them versus us. Sometimes we'll be looking for a black counselor and we might not be able to find
one.
a black counselor.
Does that affect their ability to feel that that person can truly relate?
Yes, that's the other part too. And then there's also the issue of not only can they relate, but are they qualified to counsel? You've got some folks, well, I want to get a Christian counsel. Well, do you need a Christian surgeon for heart surgery?
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You need a surgeon. You need a trained,
good one.
educated, good surgeon to work on your heart. Well, that's the same in psychology. There are ways that must be processed for us, and we need it because we're dealing with our oppression as a people, and we're dealing with the stress of our own lives.
And you just said that it's a layered, and black people, I will never make it out to be an excuse or a cop-out, but black people will always have the extra layer. On top of the pressure of life is the oppression of society.
That's right.
And whether it's historical, whether it is, as I was talking to a newscaster today about, he was saying, tell me about your experiences with racism and prejudice. And I couldn't point to the time I was made to get up out of a restaurant. But I could say I've always lived with the knowledge that I am surrounded by individuals who I may not know who is who. As our old folks from down south would say, at least down south you knew who hated you.
That's right.
At least down south you knew which street to stay away from, where not to go. Here, you don't know who's out for your job or who's going to use something against you or whatever. But that knowledge that it's just there, we literally feel haunted.
Yes.
That's almost what that movie Us sort of speaks to.
Yeah.
The black people living with the haunting of racism and oppression. And on top of that, the pressure that our Caucasian brothers and sisters, who may also have some additional pressures of their own, but we see them as sort of default. They just have problems. We have oppression and problems.
And then we kind of demote the importance of emotional and psychological healing to pat phrases, well, that's a generational curse.
Oh.
Well, what are you talking about?
You talking about my grandmama?
Right. We're cursed because we're broken and sinful. So there's some things that come with that are going to be a part of us as human beings.
Now, let's unpack that. I want to stay right there because what you just said, what popped in my mind? How every time a black person gets sick, you got to have some ginger ale and take a nap. Castor oil, ginger ale, drink some orange juice.
Get some Vaseline. That's all you need.
Put some Vicks on it.
You'll be fine.
Put some Vicks on it.
Ain't nothing wrong with you.
Daddy, I broke my leg. Put some Vicks on it.
That's right.
That's it.
And what you just said, those pat phrases are like the ginger ale of mental health. It's the generational curse. It's the demon spirit. It's and not to say that it might not be true, but it's I need to clear my space and I need to unfriend everybody. I need to cut everybody off.
I got to surround myself with all positive people. When you're going to be by yourself for the rest of your life.
That's like covering yourself in pillows. You can't live like that.
And Christianity is not an escapist religion.
Thank you.
Christianity is something that gives you the power to face. Every time you read in scripture, they tell you what the sickness was. They tell you who it was in, the gender it was in, the gender of the person, because they never wanted to avoid evil.
Well, wait a minute.
Or brokenness.
Wait a minute, Rev.
Yeah,
wait a minute. Don't you claim that sickness.
There you go.
Don't you?
There you go.
Don't you speak that.
Gosh.
Don't you? Don't
speak it over yourself.
I be like, I think I'm depressed. Don't.
That's right.
Before I get before I get depressed,
lay hands on yourself.
You better speak over yourself.
Don't tell me what's wrong with me.
Like there is
tell
an
me
inherent
everything that's right with me.
But the idea that there's an inherent like saying I'm sick is like pouring flu virus in you.
Right. That's not.
But what you just said is that it's liberating to name it.
Yes, it is.
And you said everything. What it is, who's dealing with it, how long
and
they've been.
Socioeconomic.
Yes.
Think about a black woman who is in church. She's got 3 children. Her child may have just had a child, and she's got a grandchild, and she is holding it down. I mean, she is holding it down. You don't think that, you think it's a generational curse that she's depressed? Are you kidding? No, we're talking about real live issues that can receive help for. We can receive help for, and we don't do it because we've made if you're not bleeding, then you're not sick.
Right.
You know, if you don't have canker sores, you're not sick. If you don't, if your leg isn't broken, you're not sick. But I also understand how we've had to do that on our own over and over and never trust anyone. So now breaking that cycle is vitally important for Black folk.
So is it a illness in and of itself to feel like you as the pastor has to fix all these problems?
Yeah, that is well, first of all, the transition is good to transition in that because many Black pastors are not qualified.
I ain't.
I mean, it's just
y'all,
the truth.
listen.
It's just the truth.
I'll pray for you. I love
they're
you.
not qualified.
But when it gets to a certain level, I'm like,
not.
Listen, Forum Health.
Yes, that's
Steward,
right.
Mercy.
Right. They're not. You're not qualified.
And you would be if I went out. If I tried to do a liver transplant on you in my basement, I would be arrested for medical malpractice, impersonating a doctor. I right to this point, I'm a pastor. I'm not a doctor. And watch this, 99% of us, even when we say we doctors, even if it's real, because a lot of men, even if it's real, it probably is not a doctor that has anything to do with any actual medical. And even if it's theological, that still doesn't mean it's psychological.
No, it's not.
I could be a genius in the Old Testament. That don't mean I'm gonna help that single mother.
There are individuals in the Black community, Black theologians, who have written so wonderfully in both areas, theology and psychology.
That's what I was going to get.
And so when you have such dynamic individuals who can help you, why would you go to someone that they really can't help this? A couple of reasons. One, it's free. You know, well, I ain't got to pay no money.
I'm free.
Pastor free. Just go on and send them over there. You know,
I have no fees.
You better make sure you paid your tithes.
Better pay them tithes, though.
You know, pastor free.
Well, you're getting the 5-minute special.
That's right. The second is probably ego. Well, I can handle this. I'm saved.
Right.
I'm saved. But ego, if it's not teachable, if it can't open up and say I'm a disciple, that in the sense of I need to learn about this, you shouldn't handle that.
Right.
Actually, the norm is to see them twice, get a sense of what it is they're dealing with, and then refer. But we're not doing that.
Right.
You're getting a lot of even issues where the sickness may be exacerbated because people who are uninformed and not trained are dealing with something they don't have no business.
You said something else that really touched me, because you said how do we marry psychology and theology? People like Carl Jung, who have been able to do very well in these
that's
areas.
Very good point.
How do we marry that? How do we?
Do you know that most of your major behavioral therapists, Freud, the names will come to me. They come from religious backgrounds.
Right.
Very stern religious backgrounds sometimes, but religious backgrounds nonetheless. We separate so that we can have our own territory, which means we don't help more people. And so when you actually say, okay, Pastor, there's a place that you deal with the soul that I can't deal with theologically. I mean, you do that and there's a place I can deal with that you can't. How about we partner?
Right.
And we work on this together? Because if in fact my goal is to see that the other, now think about that. Christianity is the other. Not me, the other. If I could see that other person gets better, and it's on my end not to do harm, because in counseling, it's do no harm.
Right.
Then we've got something in common for humanity, not something personal for ourselves.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong in saying, and I'll say this openly, I got my psychologist on speed dial. You feel me?
The psychologist has. Y'all hear that?
Right. I got mine
The
on
professional
speed
got the
dial.
professional
Pittsburgh.
on speed
Yes, because the stressors of life need a place for healing talk. And because they do turn into different things and exacerbate in your body and in your mind in different ways. And it really is time for us as a community to stop trying to self-help and go to people that are professionally qualified to do it.
But it's also unlearning just learned behaviors.
Yes.
It's, some of it's not all ego, and it's
That's
not all
right. That's
we
right.
think the preacher's more
Yes,
than he is.
sir.
It's
Yes,
just
sir.
that's all
That's
we've ever
right.
had.
That's true. That's right.
We talked about how we
That's
don't
right.
know
That's
who to
the
call.
history. That's
If
the
I opened
history.
up the telephone book, I wouldn't know where to start. Who's good, who's bad, and that's a trusted
Yes, sir.
figure.
The other
who
part,
loves you.
Yes,
Who cares about
that's
you.
Right. The other part is too, most of your working poor don't have as much time and access.
They couldn't fit it in if they
couldn't
wanted
fit
to.
it in, right? They still got to bring the kids to school. There's a lot of things
Absolutely.
that they have on their plate that if they feel if they ignore it, that would bring them down further.
And I mean, that's a great point, what you just said about the socioeconomic status of a person.
Yes.
I mean, for instance, Jeff and I being, still have young children. How many times do we have to look for a babysitter to get away to that banquet once every 3 months, or that date night, or whatever, or a nice church service I have to be at? What does it sound like for me to say to a loved one, hey, can you watch my kids while I go to counseling?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
We don't even talk about the stigmas,
Right.
not just
That's
the stigma of counseling, but the stigma of how you prioritize something that has been invisible to a community for so long.
That's right.
And, I leaned on my parents to watch the kids when I have an important function. I leaned on my friend. Now I'm asking you to, I gotta find space.
Yes,
like
yes, sir.
I'm barely fitting in soccer practice. I'm barely fitting in. I'm running from here to Bible study, and I don't mean to say anything about some of the most stable among us.
Right.
What about that person
That's
who's working
right.
2-3 jobs?
That's right.
Who
Exactly.
is
And I've
fighting
been
to
there.
keep their house together? I mean, if they walk away from their house for an hour, they don't know what they'll walk back to.
That's right. That's right.
I got some mothers that got 6-7 kids.
Yeah.
It is not
in their house.
embarrassing. It is not embarrassing. And I need the world to know that it is not embarrassing for you to say, I need help.
Yes. Yes.
I need help.
Now,
Yes.
can we flip to the other side? Because we have a few minutes on this segment left. Do you see an overdependence or overdiagnosis now that every time there's a problem, people say, well, I can just blame it on being mental or once something becomes accepted, it can sometimes, bear the risk of being exploited.
Yeah, there doesn't seem
or
to be a
excused. It
balance.
becomes an excuse. Popular vernacular.
I think even to go with that real quick, because I know you're going to answer the question. I know that, it seems like nowadays every kid is on Ritalin.
Yeah.
Everybody's on something.
Get them some Ritalin. No, I don't think every kid needs Ritalin.
One comedian said, now if the kid looks out the window and says, I want to play, to drug him up, like kids are supposed to want to be. Like I want to go outside and play with that ball. Give him some drugs.
Right.
A
A lot of it is from what we don't know. I remember when I learned human development in college and learned that my teenager was acting a certain way on purpose. This is the way you're supposed to act when you're 14.
This is where you're at.
This is where they're at. So a lot of times it's not knowing, but the other part is that the wealth gap has allowed for people to have a quality of life through science.
Wow.
There is and why is it that it's not available to us?
It's not.
In all actuality, real quick, when you take medication, you're supposed to, it's a bird with two wings. You're supposed to then be in some kind of psychotherapy.
To go with it. It's not just, I need my
It's
pill.
not
I
just
ain't on
the
my
pill.
pills today.
Wow.
It's
I ain't
not.
on my pills
because
today.
after you feel better, if you don't learn how to rethink,
Wow.
right, then you're still going to be in the same place. You're just going to feel better, but you're going to do the same things.
Right.
So again, there's just so much that I think that there may be an over medication in some parts of our country, but it's not in most parts.
Okay.
It really isn't.
Okay.
I don't think so.
A
I
bird
think,
with two wings. I love that.
I like that.
I love that.
Yeah.
This has been the first segment of Religiously Incorrect.
Before we end this segment, let me just say, my wife said, well, I think every church ought to have a psychologist there. And I said, that's incorrect because they're going to cost more than the pastor.
Listen.
And y'all ain't taking my side.
I love y'all.
Right.
We will
I don't love
call
y'all that
y'all when
much.
we
You're
need
gonna have to time. You're gonna have to come up with some big time, and
I will have a stack of business cards at the back of the church. But you ain't taking my money. We gonna see y'all in a little bit. Hang tight. Check us out for part 2, Religiously Incorrect Podcast. So you are previewing episode 5 of Religiously Incorrect.
Yes,
I got
sir.
Pastor Jeff.
Yes, sir.
And we have Dr. Angel Dela Cruz.
The doctor.
You know, he is the most intimidating preacher I know because he will kill you and preach your funeral. He will. You mess with him the wrong way, he will jack you up and visit you in the hospital.
And revive you.
And then revive you.
Revive you. Bring you back to life. And tell you he love you.
Exactly, in Jesus' name. So if you're watching, be sure to like, share, and by the way, we are on all podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, iHeart Radio, Spotify. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We really would like to see you subscribe there because that helps us to boost our brand and get the message out further. So be sure to follow us.
And please leave a comment as well. Leave some comments.
Argue.
Let us know. I mean, you're not going to win the argument,
I'm not answering you.
but leave one anyway.
I mean, you're not.
Hey, you ain't that important.
You don't get a mic.
You ain't the pastor.
Right. Testify. Tell the goodness of the Lord.
Yes, sir.
But for real, you can comment, you can share. If you think we're totally off base, you say what you want to say. If it's blessing you, if it's helping you, please let somebody know. That's what we want.
Yes.
Our subject tonight has been mental health.
Yes.
And if you missed part 1, which you did, you want to check the entire podcast because we talked about how mental health has grown in acceptance, particularly in the Black community, how pastors are not always or most likely are not qualified mental health professionals, and how we need to remove the stigma of attaching, sort of misdiagnosing mental health, including in spiritual terminology. Everything ain't a demon.
Right.
Everything's not a generational curse. I remember, here's my quote. A generational curse has become the ginger ale of mental health.
Right.
For Black folk.
Yes.
So
That's
listen,
right.
I'm going to tweet that later. Everything that's a mental health problem is not a generational curse.
right.
Just like you can't fix every sickness with ginger ale. Listen.
Dr. Cruz talked about a bird with 2 wings. You got to watch it to
wings.
see that. It was
You gotta
hot.
watch it.
I'm telling you,
Gotta
some
watch
good
it.
stuff.
So
Good
check
stuff.
this out, Jeff. We'll just dive right into it because the people want to hear the
Yes,
content.
yes.
We talked about mental health in general in the Black community. Now we want to hone in, Dr. Dela Cruz, on mental health with pastors and church leaders.
Sure.
Now we have seen a tragic spike in suicides among clergy. We're seeing in high pressure situations that we normally associate with mega churches and large ministries, and we're even seeing some smaller ministries, family churches, mid-sized churches, pastors, and I don't like to use this word. We would say like cracking and all that stuff. Succumbing to certain pressures and the constrictions that seem to come on them that aren't just the pressures of life that we all go through, financial pressures, marriage, family, children, but the responsibility that's sacred and heavy for the spiritual health and well-being of groups of people. And you talked about some dynamics when we were sort of offline, and we want to sort of unpack that, but let's just talk about the overall pressures that pastors feel. And I'm not looking for the anniversary sermon, pastors have it hard and all that stuff. We hear that all the time. Let's talk a little digging deeper into how that might manifest in the life of a minister or a church leader.
I think number one, it's one of the reasons why we're ordained, right? Because we get a picture of the depth of responsibility we have as human beings for the souls of the congregant members we serve. And so God is letting us know, hey, you've got a lot of responsibility here, and it's gonna bear weight on your heart, it's gonna bear weight on your person, and it's gonna bear weight on your life overall, including your family.
Wow.
That doesn't just include you got to work every day, or you got to raise your children in the same environments as any other parent does. Be concerned about the same things, like paying your bills and paying your taxes. So you've got that responsibility, or that depth of spiritual heaviness. Let's call it that.
Right.
Then you have the expectations of the culture you're in.
Wow.
Sometimes the church culture is what is a driving force in the lack of mental health for pastors.
Wow. So church culture can be the driving force.
Yes.
In the lack of, unpack that.
If there's a culture in the church that the pastor is supposed to have all the answers, matter of fact, he or she is supposed to be able to discern when you're sick and when you're not.
Right.
This,
you should have knew I was going through.
Yeah, right. You should have known it. If I wasn't here, there's 100 people in the church, and I don't see you like I used to, but I didn't see you, so I didn't. The pressures that you shouldn't be under because you're the pastor. Right. Like, you don't go through the same pressures I do. You're the pastor. All of these, and that's kind of church culture.
Right.
No, you can't. Yours is the family we put up, so that we can use that as an image to become, rather than pressing toward together in partnership to live out the biblical mandate. I've often said the epistles are not for the world. The epistles are for the church.
They're for the church.
Yes.
And when Paul deals with leadership and membership and how they're supposed to be family, that's a healthy atmosphere. Mothers and fathers, but when you're the pastor and you're set aside because you need to measure up into the image I've created for you, that's a culture that's usually harmful.
Doc, let me ask you something. When I would be going out of town, a lot of times I would get a phone call, especially when we were all going for Thanksgiving. Say Thanksgiving is coming up, and they would call me and they would say, "Where you at? Where you at, Jeff? We here already. I would get frustrated, not because I wasn't on the right path, but because I hadn't arrived yet.
Because you weren't there yet.
Yeah.
What about pastors who haven't arrived yet, especially when they have ministerial friends who are already there, and it becomes a stress on them that I still have the small church, I still have the corner store church, and my friends, those I might have graduated seminary with, are all further much ahead of me.
And I don't feel like just bouncing off of what Jeff said, I don't feel like my current situation matches my talents and giftings, and I feel I almost feel like I'm being wasted.
Yes, sir.
How does that play into that?
Well, here is where I think, and this was referenced to on an interview by Dr. Frank Thomas and Bishop Clark. And Bishop Clark was asked the question, what do you think is happening amongst ministers now? And may not be getting it exact, or what do they need? And he was talking about we need depth.
I saw that, yeah.
He said we need depth, and the depth that so many young ministers or ministers maybe younger than me are going to is they'll talk about depth from this century versus the 2,000 years of Christianity that encourages us to say, wait a minute, St. Ignatius was a small church pastor. Or John Wesley was an itinerant pastor who sometimes was depressed and felt like he wasn't up to his call, but he went to the ancients. He counted, and I include church mothers and fathers, because there were writers of both. And of course, the Bible is male dominated and male written.
Right.
So it doesn't include
the female perspective
and presence. So there are people who wrote and talked about the life of the pastor, like the rule of Saint Benedict. These are things that you read in seminary because your ordination has required you to be able to go to that material from all those years ago and encourage yourself.
But we've
and be
overlooked
encouraged.
what you
We've
said,
overlooked it,
the
yes.
context that some of those
Yes,
great
yes.
men and women that we
Yes,
venerate,
yes.
and we put some of these people in mega churches that they didn't have. We give them fame
Right,
that they
that's
never
right,
had.
that's right.
You know, some folk, as we always say, they don't love you till you're dead.
Right.
You know, we weren't really paying attention to them. Their contemporaries weren't
Right,
really respecting
right.
them. And how much, speaking to that depth in younger generations especially, but I think older ones get caught up in it too, trying to
Sure,
play catch
sure,
up, is the
sure.
culture of comparison.
Right.
The
right.
social media.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
used to be, and I'm not saying like I'm that old, but I would hear older ministers say things. I was just talking with some of our mentor ministers in my Young Pastors Thriving group
right.
about how you just kind of heard about this guy that was really blowing up and doing
Sure,
pretty well or had
sure.
taken over a great church. Now we see everybody's ministries every day, just like in natural life, people are pressured to exaggerate
Yes.
or sort of just kind of fudge the numbers a little bit. Everybody
How
has
many you
access-
running, Doc?
How much you
Right,
running, Doc?
How much you run over here, Doc?
I had at least 175 this week, and I slayed them all.
Anniversary for me. Bring all your choirs.
And when I show up, here we go. And when I show up, only a portion of my people can travel. Bro, this is your church and the church next door. But the culture of comparison,
Yeah.
I see it played out, and this might tag at a few people, in the way that we present ourselves, we market ourselves,
that's right.
we make the most foily flyer, fire doves. You know, we will put pictures of other people's churches
Yes.
in cities we don't live in
Right, that's right.
on the backs of our
Well,
flyer.
there are pastors that have started marketing businesses
Yes.
for churches, right? But the other thing too is
Branding.
not only comparison, but the competition,
Competition.
and that's American culture.
Right.
That is capitalism.
Christian capitalism.
Yeah, that's capitalism. That's not Christianity. When I got to the matter of fact, Paul said, you don't compare yourself with your brother. Jesus even said, hey, the disciples were saying, hey, he's casting out demons in your name. I would have loved to know who that was too.
Right,
By the
right,
way,
right.
There's got to be something on him somewhere.
It was Benny Hinn.
Yeah. Yeah, right. He about that old.
He's
too.
not. You are in the crew. Welcome to Religiously Incorrect, Dr. Dela Cruz.
Hey, and then he started.
Y'all ain't right. Y'all ain't right.
Don't curse me, Doc. Don't curse me, Dr. Hinn. I love you.
But you get the competition, and guess what? Your members go to those conferences, and when they come back, they put the unrealistic expectation
There it is.
on you. Well, how come our church? How come it isn't? And we don't. We're always so non-confrontational, right? Or don't want to offend anyone. Which we're actually suppressing a great
I was just
deal.
going to say, we're
Right,
internalizing
it.
responses we
Yes,
wish we could have made,
yes,
things
yes,
we could have said, and
yes.
now we are burning up on the
Right,
inside with
and-
no outlet.
Exactly. And that is what leads to the mental illness. That's what leads to, well, then you're serving 50 people faithfully whose children you've baptized,
Yes.
Right,
whose daughters
right.
you've married and sons
Right.
you've counseled. You made a difference in the kingdom of God, but because somebody has said you want to compare your part of the kingdom to her part of the kingdom, you're not worth anything. And of course, you get the stupid theologies that are out there that say, hey, if you ain't got a big church, you ain't got no faith.
Right, right.
That's a
Bad.
lot of pressure, but with learning, and this is where it's just my desire that more and more pastors go to seminary, because they'll learn about the church mothers and fathers who went through the same thing. Do you know that Mother Teresa has writings about how she doubted God?
Wow.
Here's a woman who goes to another country with no money, gives up her inheritance. She was an heiress. She gave up her inheritance and started an order with nothing in another country. She had doubts? Yes. It's called being human.
Right.
It's called walking with the divine as a finite person.
So as we
Not
look
the-
at that,
Go ahead.
well, go ahead.
Not only do the members come back, But the pastor comes
does
Yes.
too.
because
Yes.
he goes there and they tell him 5 ways to build a church.
That's
Formulas.
The
Yes.
formulas for
Yes.
evangelism, and
Yes.
they come back and they try all. Because I've been to Propel, I've
Yes,
been
sir.
to these big
Yes, sir.
conferences,
And we try everything.
and
We had an
try-
ice cream truck outside the
Right.
church. We had jumping jack Sunday. You know,
When each ministry is different.
You
It
got
has a,
you got 80-year-old preachers in skinny
Right,
jeans.
right.
and half of
ripping
it comes
they-
from the you know
Right.
where they're at. I mean,
Yes, yes.
You're talking about somebody in Detroit or New York, and you're trying to bring this formula to war.
Yeah.
Bro, I'm in
Yeah.
Quimby Park
right.
in Warren. I'm on the jungle gym, Doc. Ain't no. That's my youth ministry. My youth ministry is the jungle gym next door to the church.
Right. Faith is not a formula. Faith is being faithful to the God you have not seen but know He's alive.
Wow.
He's alive. So if I'm being faithful in Warren, then I'm doing what God requires of me where I am. And so I often wonder, because it has happened to me as a young minister. I'm going, wow, why isn't anyone responding? So you go to learn more, you go to do more. When in all actuality, God is saying, can't you understand I've called you to a specific moment and I've called you to a specific time and
Right.
place? I'm here with you.
Right.
For some reason, and it is the competition. It is, look at what he's doing, look at what she's doing, and I'm not doing anything. And then people are wanting something.
Always.
That pressure of the culture of the church has to take some responsibility for the emotional sicknesses of pastors. Because they are very, very tough.
Rewind. Say it again.
The church has to take some responsibility for the emotional distresses and sicknesses of pastors, because they're expecting things that are not biblical, number one, and number two, don't know what the Bible expects. So, because that's enough right there. And I think it's intimated, but I'm not sure. He says, for you must care for their souls. There are places, I heard one preacher, I think it was Pastor Clark, he said, there are very few things I will bang my hand on the table for, right? That we ain't going to do that. You're going to have to get a different pastor if you're going to do that here. Because we've been called to that specific moment too.
Right.
And so there's just a lot of pressure on pastors that is unnecessary, and part of it is the congregation.
And I want to talk about, since there's a responsibility there that has sort of permeated the entire church culture, I had to relearn how to be emotionally vulnerable before my congregation.
Yes, sir.
And sort of release myself from the Messiah complex. And I'll tell you what happened. Being at my church at Second, doing a lot more funerals.
Sure.
Than I was doing at my father's church, which was relatively young and didn't have the same breadth and width of influence that sort of people gravitate, cousins, uncles.
Sure.
When I faced, and Jeff was there with me, some tragedies, when I had to bury some children. I'll never forget the one I had to do. And all of Warren, of course, knows it was a car wreck. I shouldn't have even viewed myself.
Wow.
If I had been wiser.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I wouldn't. I'm trying to be there for the family.
Yes.
It was a very difficult situation. And I was haunted, got through the service, and broke down the next day in church. Thank God for a loving church.
Yeah.
I've learned,
Absolutely.
and what I've gone through with the trauma of our family this year, I've learned how to be vulnerable. But what you said about responsibility, we go back to that joke about the ginger ale. Sometimes we have churchy fixes that aren't necessarily healthy for the pastor. It might placate or make the church feel like they've done, the pastor was sad today, I'm gonna bake him a cake.
Right.
Or here's a few extra dollars, he had hard, let's make sure we give him a good offering and all that kind of stuff. And there was one powerful scene in, I used to watch Mad Men when it was on AMC.
Yeah, I did too.
And that young upstart Peggy, when she was becoming a really good, she has an argument with the top guy and the top creative guy, and she's not feel appreciated. She's having emotional problems. And he screams at her, that's what the money's for.
Yeah.
And she wanted something much deeper.
Yeah, that's right.
Than the money. And so I'm not saying don't bake me cakes, because you know who you are.
Right.
That red velvet cake, I need another one real soon.
Don't stop giving me pound
Don't
cakes.
stop.
Pound cakes.
Don't
Fried
stop.
chicken.
But what are some more substantial things that congregations and church culture can offer or open up the door for pastors that would help during those pressure times?
I think validating their need to sometimes, if they need to be able to go see a psychologist and won't be demonized as weak or as somebody who can't lead me. Part of it is we think that God is not in science, right? When the Lord is in science.
He made it all.
He has reconciled the world, and that means knowledge, science, philosophy. Not just a part of the world it's all the world, it's everything.
Wow.
And so to validate and say to him or her, we have not only your health insurance available, but we have mental health insurance available for you too. One of the good things in the main line is that they understood that. For mainline pastors, I have mental health insurance so that it won't cost me take all the money out of my pocket.
Right.
But if I need somebody, I can go and talk to them.
Wow.
And then the congregation being not image conscious, but heart loving, right? Say,
good.
I'm
That's
going to love
good.
the pastor. Look,
Right.
don't put all that pressure on her. Come on now. Her mother just died. Think about when you go through a season where somebody you love dies.
Absolutely.
And you're not allowed to grieve like anyone else. There's something out of order with that. And that's because of stardom of pastors, capitalism of the church.
Messiah complex, that Superman.
And believe me, it's a part of a social context to be encouraged. Hey, attaboy, attagirl, you're doing a
can
great
make it.
job. You
Yeah.
can make it.
Right.
But it's when it is you are made something other than a human being.
Right.
You should be a brother as well as a pastor.
Right.
A sister as well as a pastor. Why can't I not be your pastor and your brother? And sometimes, my brothers, we're going to need to do it whether they like it or not.
Yes, yes.
Now, I do that. I will do that. I've done it because I just could no longer bear this kind of pressure.
Right.
I had to just say, look, I can't say anything today. There are meetings because of the things that have happened. I can't go to that meeting today. I'm gonna have to, and I don't skip my responsibilities.
Right.
I
Right.
believe in faithfulness. Holiness Church
Oh, yeah.
taught me faithfulness.
You're gonna be there.
That's right. You're gonna be there no matter what. But that let me know that I need to do that for the sake of others.
Can I talk to you about, because we talked about accountability of the congregation. What about accountability of the pastor? And I'm talking from a personal standpoint. Where I went through something very traumatic this year, where I was extremely depressed, really ready to give up. And if I didn't have my brother right here to really talk to, almost every day, he would say, just call, man, just call, just call, And, we read the statistics where a lot of pastors commit suicide, and it says because they didn't have anybody to talk, including their spouse.
That's
Didn't have anybody.
That's
Right.
Including
The
their spouse.
isolation is
Yes.
isolation of the pastorate. Yeah.
Right.
It's particular to Western pastors. We've been so intent on being individuals
It's our culture.
that
it's American
that
culture.
I can do this by myself. Then we don't go, man, I got to call Todd.
Right.
I just cannot carry this anymore. The image is not as important as me getting some help.
Yes.
And when you have brothers and sisters that you can cry with, that you can talk to, that can say, man, this is wrong, and what can we do? Or let me just listen. And if they need to say, hey, I got somebody you can talk to.
Right.
Here, let
Right.
me reference you. So yeah, the thing is though, what we don't do is we don't grieve very well. We really don't.
And grief is not just about death.
Yes, it's about loss, period.
Loss.
You were given something and it was taken away, or you thought something was going to happen and then it all blew up in your face. That's traumatic, man. That is traumatic. And people need to understand that we're not superhuman. We're Christians like everyone else who's been given another responsibility. And so, yeah, I think it's having places, man, where if I curse, I'm not going to hell. You know,
and I don't even curse, but every once in a while.
You know what I mean?
Every once in a while. Jeff taught me how to curse.
Look.
He taught me.
In counseling, whenever
from Youngstown, especially when someone comes and visits me, that's the first thing I'll say. All the major words.
Just give it to him
right off the bat. This is a
I'm gonna
judgment
start doing.
free.
Wait a minute. Wait.
I'm gonna start doing that. Yes, sir.
Yeah, right.
Let's do it now.
Right. just to get it off our chest. Right?
This is a whole new version of setting the atmosphere.
That's right.
This is religiously incorrect, mother.
Let's set the atmosphere.
And I often say this is a non-judgmental zone.
Right.
There's nothing here that's going to condemn you, and God is not really interested in light stuff like that. One theologian, his name was Saint Moses, I think of the early 300s. He said, I got too many other things to worry about, like men beating on their wives, people ripping off the poor. He was naming all these big things he had to be concerned about. He says, am I going to be concerned with you having a lager of beer on Tuesday night? No, there are too many other things. We're majoring on the minor. Yes. Your heart is broken, man.
Right.
Your heart is broken.
Right.
And what did Jesus say? I come to heal the broken heart. So that doesn't include mine.
Not to fix the potty mouths.
Yeah.
But to heal.
Right. See, because that comes overseas.
That's in the holiness version.
Yeah, right.
The holiness version.
You got to straighten up that talk.
Right.
Peter knew how to do it better than us.
Right. Everybody can't be Peter now.
Right.
Everybody want to be Peter.
I do that especially because there's an amount of guilt that's been put on us that does not come from the Holy Spirit.
Wow.
It does not. We're not
cultural
allowed.
conditioning.
Yeah, exactly. You really should be angry when somebody hurts you. You should be sad when you lose someone. You should be glad when it's a joyous time. All of these feelings that we've been told, don't do this, you got to be superior. Paul said, in my weaknesses, I am made strong.
That's it.
I had a guy at the church that I'm currently pastoring at say the other day in Sunday school, I don't cry anymore at funerals. Why?
Yeah.
Bro, I'm scared of you. I'm scared of you, Doc.
Yeah.
We might not weep.
He might have killed him.
As those.
I've been sending these CSI investigators to his house.
There's a grieving process that has to happen.
Sure.
You know, everybody got upset when LeBron left Cleveland and was burning his jersey. Let him burn. That's a grieving process.
They're going to buy him again. They'll be back.
Still got the money from it.
You already made the money.
And then came back like a boss.
Right, like a boss.
And won the whole thing.
And they bought him again.
Yep. That's a bad man.
I want to backtrack a little bit because we sort of covered the struggling, comparing himself. We're looking up at the lights and the glamour, and we're not there yet. But a lot of these issues of mental illness and suicide are happening to the so-called winners.
Yes.
People the people we're looking to and saying, I aspire to have that, are the people who are suffering the burnout.
Right.
We've seen these tragic stories of people who seem to have an ideal life and probably do. They are blessed in those areas, but there were other pressures and other things that were poking at them that they just couldn't release. And they were at the mega church. Right. They were on full salary. They had the picturesque family.
Sure.
So what have you seen? And we want to talk a little bit about numbers. We talked a little bit about that before. The pressure that comes on when you do reach the pinnacle. So you got one level.
Right.
I ain't got nobody. My ministry hasn't taken off. I'm depressed. Now you have the pressure of actually getting there. And we see it with superstars. We see it with sports figures.
Sure.
Let's talk about that and the culture once again that's created that success we can't handle or the burden where we weren't built to handle. We weren't built to handle the burden.
Sure. I think when you have a loss of meaning in the life that you're living now, because meaning is not only when things are great, but meaning is found in your pain and in your suffering. We don't take the cross as this implement of shame and suffering and identify with a suffering. Christian in theology, and it just seems like every other facet of emotional or spiritual healing has taken this on or has some kind of section for it, that pain is necessary in life. Right? Victor Vocal, who created the logos therapy or logotherapy, says you can find meaning in the deepest of suffering. And now he's an Auschwitz survivor.
Wow.
Okay, so he
knows.
He knows, right? But who knows like
He won.
we know?
He won the suffering.
Right, he sure did. Who knows like we know? How our ancestors know. How
Absolutely.
we've taken, look at the 4 girls who were killed in the Alabama church in 19, was it 60?
16th Street Baptist Church.
16th Street. Are you kidding? You're talking about immense suffering, but we didn't say that was sinful or we shouldn't have that. Somehow we got some kind of really ridiculous philosophy or theology that says suffering is not a part of our religious experience.
Right.
Yes, it is.
It is. It is.
And I think that's what has happened. Now that you've got the money, the fame, and success, is that meaningful?
Or are you just under pressure to perform?
Yes.
Metrics,
Right,
numbers,
right.
goals.
Because after you get the big building, now you got to pay the gas bill.
That's it.
Yes.
Now you got to pay the light bill. Now you got to pay for the staff. Now you've got to bring in all of the. So was that you or was that God?
And lives are in the balance.
Yes.
And don't let your numbers drop. Don't let the people not show up.
Because then people start getting fired. You start letting folk go before you look at yourself. I've seen numerous ministries that have done that kind of thing. So it's what is meaningful. Is this what God really wanted for you?
Right.
We had a pastor who had a moral indiscretion, couldn't take it,
Wow.
killed himself. Again, what was important? Now, and I don't know anybody. It ain't my business who's going to heaven or hell. That ain't in my theology, it ain't none of our business. God says, I'm taking care of that. But what was it that you couldn't turn to someone and get help in a community of faith where you're supposed to have somebody else you can turn to?
Right.
But in this dog eat dog world,
Yes.
me, Mr. Lowly Preacher, I can't wait to see.
Yeah.
I want to hear that so-and-so's numbers
Yes,
are down.
sir. Yeah.
I want to hear, he ain't pulling them like he used to.
right.
I
That's
heard
right.
everybody leaving him and going. And we don't know that we are contributing.
Yes, sir.
That spirit, if not the voice and the actual words themselves. I always joke with people, I say it always gets back.
Yeah,
one
sure
way
it
or
does.
another.
Sure it does.
And
Sure
you
it
think
does.
that person who's at the top of the mountain doesn't feel all that pressure and nipping and hate
Sure,
and all of
sure,
that?
sure.
And you know how we talk when people are, the only reason they got big because they was compromising.
Yeah,
Only reason
yeah.
they got big is
Sure.
because they wasn't real. They watered it down, and that's why the
yeah,
mass. Some people
yeah.
are preaching the unadulterated gospel. They are being real. They're having real Bible studies
Yeah,
when the
that's right.
TVs aren't
That's
on,
right.
and they're growing. And then every church and every person has a life cycle.
Right,
You
that's
will
right.
have your
Yes.
ups and your
Yes.
downs, and we are like companies
Right.
will kill ourselves to try to keep going up and won't accept the plateaus.
But we also have those personally, and continuing to answer your question, what does it mean to learn to be content? Right? I'm not satisfied where I am, but God says for me to be content with where He's got me here. I'm here with Him. This is what He has for me to do. And I got to find that this is where God wants me. Not here, but right where I am. And that's something that we don't learn as Americans. We consume 25% of the world's products. I mean, that's a lot.
That's a lot.
Give me, take. And it's all mine rather than, hey, do I have enough? And Paul says this in a doggone prison cell with rats crawling all over
Right.
and feces water half an inch over his feet. Learn to be content.
Right.
Learn to be content. He was content with where he was with God. Not that he wanted to stay there,
but where he was with God.
But where he was with God.
Wow.
And so that's another thing that contributes to.
One of the things I learned the other day was that Borders had the opportunity to buy Netflix. Was it No, it was not the Borders. It was
Blockbuster. Blockbuster
Yeah.
had a chance to buy Netflix.
Had the opportunity to buy Netflix.
Now, did that guy commit suicide?
No, but he did lose everything.
Oh, okay.
He went under.
I shouldn't joke about that.
No, and then you have other companies like Kodak. Did they stop making pictures?
Right.
Exactly. They never stopped making pictures. So when people don't change, with the time, and I think a lot of people get left behind, and because they get left behind because they did not change with the times and with the seasons.
They live in regret.
Right.
They live in
That's right.
Yeah. They live that the world has passed them by. And what you brought up, and I'm grateful for your expertise and your expert perspective.
Absolutely.
Because it's more than just that. Like I said earlier, pastors got it hard, and y'all saints getting on the pastor's nerves and all that.
Right.
Pastors are human beings.
Yes.
What you just said about brother pastor, and the first time I ever heard it was I really, came into Second Baptist, and one deacon in particular would always say that old school phrase. Now, brother pastor. I said, brother pastor.
Right.
I'm Pastor Johnson.
Right.
But now, every once in a while I say, give me permission to be brother for about the next 5 minutes, and I promise I'll get back to pastor when I'm ready.
That's right.
But mental health is of the utmost importance, whether you are a lay member, whether you are a pastor, and dare I say, whether you are saved or unsaved.
Yes.
Can I tell you that getting saved might not fix your mental problem?
That's right.
If you got to go to a therapist first and then you make it down somebody's altar, God bless you. I hope God gives you the grace to make it there.
Right.
Yes.
But don't even pretend like church and the quick fix of spirituality, the emotional moment at somebody's altar, because so many times we present it that way.
Right.
We say irresponsible things. If the Lord's going to take it all away, no, you're still going to be sad when you leave here, baby.
Right.
You're going to shake my hand and still be mad.
Right.
But we appreciate the expertise. We're so sorry our time is limited, but you already have an open invitation back.
So
we are going to
much.
drive and find you.
Awesome. Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
We're going to do a podcast in Pittsburgh.
Podcast
because they losing anyway.
Listen, bye.
Hey, Mike is my dude. That's my dude.
This is the Religiously Incorrect Podcast with our very special guest, Pastor Angel Dela Cruz, and we want to thank Freeze Barbershop.
Look at it. Come down here.
5-star
Check us out.
barbershop.
5-star.
Over here on
Yes, sir.
Youngstown, 4021.
Yeah.
4021 Youngstown Road. Come out here and get fresh. I solved the puzzle, so I got a free haircut. I just want to say that publicly. So I got to get that free lineup. But come out, support black businesses. We appreciate being here in the shop. We appreciate you all tuning in. Please like and share this video. Make sure you follow us on YouTube, subscribe, share this, tell people that there is real talk coming real raw and uncut at Religiously Incorrect, and we can't wait for our next episode.
God bless y'all.
Y'all take care.